Shalom Rastafari, and it's your Wyndham Raz Baruchu Teferi, brother Raz Baruchu Teferi. And like I said, we were looking into the earlier period, if people have any questions concerning Egypt in the Bible, and then when you go to the earlier periods of time, you know what I mean? So now this is Genesis chapter 10. So, when people want to say, they speak about, I think Gerald Macy speaks about in his works, the gods and the glorified. And some of the brethren studying Macy's works, I think there was some, he left some blueprints for better, better articulation or betterly putting things together. You know what I'm saying? Because he was able to see things that were in the biblical text, in the ancient Egyptian text. But though most people know, like the real scholars of ancient Egypt, when they go study it, you can't just you don't just pull up a wall of like the 12 or the 14 I think it was like the 14 disciples, and then 7 of them had an aunt who were like the master, the patriarchs, you know what I mean? And you get this vision of the 7 Elohims, of Ha Elohim, the mighty Ha Elohim, the Almighty. Though in this vid, what we basically speaking about, because getting into Egypt, the part where in Isaiah 20:5 where it says they're afraid of Ethiopia, which is the expectation, and then secondly, Egypt, their glory, you know what I'm saying? Egypt, which is the glory, and inheritance. It's just saying that the ancient Egyptians were black people. That's basically what it's saying. Though the national communities of Israel, like what was latter preserved of the law, the Feta Nagesh, you know what I'm saying, the institutions of the Almighty. Why did it have to be preserved? Because it was law and order. Without it, they would corrupt themselves and they would go getting into other things that they were not supposed to get into. This is pretty obvious. This is what happened, and this is why the Gentiles came over. They became rulers, because this had to get Israel right. You remember where Josh says that who causes famine, God or man? You know what I mean? And man, what happens, the question is like a trick question, is that man causes their own famine and then they blame Ha Elohim. It's like the consequence comes, right, for what you did wrong, and instead of saying, oh, well, yeah, I did it wrong, I'm gonna do this bid and pray for mercy, that I come out in righteousness, instead you blame Ha Elohim. And that's really what we get with the whole the Egyptians, and brothers want to feel like they Egyptians and everything like that. It's like they blaming Ha Elohim because they were raised, many brothers were raised in some of these traditions like Catholicism, and these are cruel. A lot of these were cruel. Like if you ask, ask black people what they went through growing up in Catholicism, all right? It wasn't good. You ain't gonna hear no good stories. Many of them ran away from the gospel church life because of that. Now others of us, we experienced some hard experiences. Some of our mothers were like Methodists and Baptists and stuff like that, because most black folks usually, especially in the southern areas, and most of the time they're not usually they're not usually Catholic. But though there is a portion of brothers and sisters who grew up, like if you look in the northern parts, like the East Coast and stuff like that, they grew up in Catholicism. And in hardcore places like Philly and New York, Catholicism is they went through some bad ish. They went through some ish. You know what I mean? And that's why they probably go so hard against the Bible. You know what I'm saying? Because the Bible being misled in its teachings that we're not the Ethiopian Hebrews, we're not the children of Israel, and the overlooking of the King of Kings, QEDAMAWI, HAILE SELASSIE, the kinsman redeemer, the sovereign, the only sovereign. You know what I'm saying? And we could say that the only sovereign of the world. And even they know that. And De Gregory, he also pointed to that in his book, speaking of his imperial majesty. And seeing the movements of the people, we could see why, even though he was on a high active status, a high level of being an activist, he really still could not articulate what he probably had learned about his imperial majesty, because most of the time black people were going against who they really were, especially over here in the Americas with the 40-year generation after the 1965 Civil Rights Act, and much that went on since 1892 to 2012. Obviously, the Gentiles must have been worried about that, because you calculate 120 years from 1892 to 2012, and even the Lord says that I would only strive with man for 120 years. Right? He said I would. So obviously they must have knew something about that. And then to stage 9/11, knowing that that's the Ethiopian New Year. It's also the birthday of the Black Messiah, Jesus Christos, Jesus Christ. And then his mother, Mariam, both born on that day, according to the original Tawahedo church tradition. You see what I'm saying? Tawat. And that's interesting, the word Tawat, because we saw that in the in Dr. Ben and Dr. Ben's book, We the Black Jews, and we were looking at that, and we felt that to be interesting. This was another, I think, page right here. We thought this was interesting too. Biblical text, Egyptian influences on biblical text. You know, whoever, we haven't really read the whole thing, but it's interesting too, because it mentions that Tarhaka in 2 Kings 19 and 19. Oh, okay. When this king was fighting against the Assyrians. And we don't want to say, when we're mentioning Nimrod, we don't want to mention the earlier period of those Assyrians, because Asher, and we're about to show you right here where Asher, he comes up out of the same places that were built up by the righteous Nimrod, Cush, when they were good. And we can see that because Yahweh says he was a mighty hunter, and also is a saying of the times, a mighty hunter before the Yahweh. And I question the Narmer palettes. I really question the Narmer palettes with Deuteronomy 33 and I believe it is 17. The Narmer palettes. I would suggest you compare the Narmer palettes, the palettes of Narmer, to Deuteronomy. Let's see if we can go and catch it real quick. It was Deuteronomy 33 and 17. And there was a reason that we would say that. Let's go back there, because there was another video we was gonna do on Egypt, when Josh says Egypt is my people, you know what I mean, like his people, and then he says Egypt is my glory. But then remember that he also says that his people were in bondage in Egypt. You know what I'm saying? They're in bondage in Egypt and come out of her. So there was a spirituality of rulership that was concerning Egypt as a nation, and many of different type of Egyptians were ruling at the time, though they are not the seed Mitzrayim. We know the Mitzrayimites, those of Mitzrayim, the children of Ham, right? One of the children of Ham also was Cush in Ethiopia and Cush. And we know that they worked together with the children of Shem, the righteous children of Shem at the time, Asher. You know what I mean? And we're going to go and show that. Reason being, let's pull up these, because there's much, you know, when we reading much knowledge, and then we want to kind of articulate it back to the people and everything. Sometimes it's so much that will be going through the mind and everything. We have to sit and kind of sup on just that that one bowl of soup. You know, there's so many bowls of soup to, you know what I mean? So many different types of soup, but sometimes we got to sit down and just, you know, eat the bowl of greens that we got in front of us, and then we'll get to the mushroom soup a little bit later. You know what I mean? So basically, let's go over here to, as we said, Deuteronomy. It was 33 and 17. Let's see if we can go to that real quick. Let's do it. Let's put up in the Blue Letter Bible, because the Blue Letter Bible has some notes that kind of go into the template of it. Now, the interesting thing is that when Yahweh says Egypt is my glory and everything, the word there is actually teferi, is tifera, as in teferi. And then we get to see these with the children of David, which is QEDAMAWI, HAILE SELASSIE, the kingdom, the branch of David's own line, Rastafari, the true Rastafari, and those who set up in the institution, as in the Lion of Judah Society, and many of the others, the Bingi, the Bobo Shanti. and the true institutions, the orders that are set up by His Imperial Majesty, as well as the Ethiopian World Federation, you know, which is there to bring that glory back to Ha Elohim, you know, getting the people back on top, or bringing the people out of poverty. You know what I'm saying? Redeeming His people from the downpression of the enemies, whether they black or white, because Egypt in its both forms have been oppressive, whether it was the black Egypt, or it was the white Egypt, or it was the Mongoloid Egypt, it was the mixed Egypt, whichever one, they were both oppressive. Until the Romans came in and they started to pretend to be the Egyptians. The reason was that we know that the whole thing about white supremacy, why they can't really pretend to be the Egyptians, is because the truth about Egypt is that everybody knows that Egypt was not the original, like Mitzrayim and them. Once you study and you go back and you look at the glory, like many of the monuments and the things that were made glorious about the kingdoms at the time, they were not white. You know, that's a fact. That's factual. As a matter of fact, the type of what you see as white supremacy at that time, they probably wasn't even thinking about that, because those type of, if ones want to mention like albinos and everything like that, they didn't exist. Though they existed on a first form level, but they didn't have that type of rulership. You know what I mean? So it was no way that they would have been put into those parts of history like as rulers in the land, because they weren't in the land at that time. That the ancient Egyptians were at that time smart enough to keep them out. You know what I mean? Keep the enemy out. But again, they faded out. They faded out. They were uniting states and stuff like that, like the United States, and it faded out like that. You know, there's a lot of things that happen. So when we go over here and let's get to since we got a duplicate of this page, because this was, we was in the word Teferet, but let's get let's see if we can get, let's kind of get a little bit more. There we go. Right, and everything. So let's Deuteronomy 33, and since we're speaking about Norma right now, Deuteronomy 33, was it? Yeah, let's see. It's Deuteronomy 33 and 17. So let's see if we go there real fast. Okay, here we go. This is why we were speaking about the palates of Norma and everything like that. So now, if you compare this verse right here, now unicorn, horns of a unicorn, or the buffalo soldiers. The buffalo soldiers. So this is like the roots of the buffalo soldiers, and we'll show you that right now. We can see that that was like the root, but I would suggest you compare this verse with the palates of Narmer, because there's something really interesting about the palates of Narmer. And we're not saying that's exactly the Nimrod dynasty, though we're starting to see things that is pointing that way. We'll get more evidence, and you know what I'm saying, we'll get more study and more evidence before we clarify it. And again, those Assyrians at that time, when we say like the Assyrians, it wasn't the same type of because at that time Asher and Cush, you know, working together, the Shemites and the Cushites together from Shinar, which was Ethiopia, ancient Ethiopia, and the kingdom and the Mamleket of Nimrod was righteous at that time, but then it became corrupted. Now, there's a saying that there's a Nimrod that comes out of the west, right? Which is it could be a family line of the Nimrodians, after passed down, began to corrupt themselves, just like the ancient Egyptians did, and so did the Israelites. And the biblical truth of this basically speaks to us of this. You know, the Bible speaks to us of this. So let me see if we'll pull up the Palace of Narmer. You can use other search screens too. You don't have to use just you know, what is put in front of you. You know what I mean? But we can also improve our own search engines and our own businesses and stuff like that, and begin to watch out for these ones that what they call capitalism, but it's not. It's like downpression. You know what I mean? How like they hire like these labor unions so they could give you like crumbs and shit. So you either like picking cotton and shit and like dying, sweating and shit all day, and then they keep all the money and they got like Range Rovers and shit they driving. You know what I'm saying? And mansions and too many cars and too many houses and shit because they don't want to share. It's just evil. It's greed. You call it greed, whatever you want to call it. Though, let's look up the Nimrod. Okay, when you put it like that, it won't come up. So we'll pull up the pallets of Narma because there was something that we want to show you in Genesis 10. That's interesting, and this should quiet the Hebrews about them not being Hamites, because actually the Hamites and Shemites were working as one righteous nation, and they built like 5 great cities back at that time. Now, if you look at this, we'll pull this up real quick. Let's see if we can get one of these real quick. Let's see. Okay, that's very interesting to push, and but we want to get that whole. Let's see if we can get that whole, because we were looking at the whole thing the other day. And if you look at like the left side and the right side of the brain, let's see if we can get that. Okay. So if you're looking at this, you see, let's see, we can go to the whole picture itself, if it'll let us know. Okay, we don't really want to, we got to be careful because, you know, they write different doctrines to try to keep people in confusion. So sometimes you have to look at the work yourself. Actually, okay, let's see here. Okay, here we go right here. Okay, so if you can see it from there, you see that the 2 bulls with the horns, you see the horns right there, and then it's interesting. Now this is interesting. I didn't even notice this before, but I would say that like the unicorn symbology, though I'm not gonna say that. Maybe that was to hang the pallet up, or though we see here this is like Narmer, and then this was like I think like the priest, and then he had like the shoes, right? And then here goes the there's the hawk, and then it has the ring through the nose of the enemy. It's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's a double pallet though. Let's look at the double. Okay, here we go. The double pallet. All right, this is what we want to see, because on the double pallet, on the second one here, is the bull pushing. So now when we go look at this verse in Deuteronomy 33 and 17, it says his glory, right? His glory, Bikor Shoro Hadar Lo Wekirini Karini Re'em Kariniwa Bahem Amin Yenagua. We was trying to see if that word there, because we see glory there, if it was the same glory as the Teferet. Let me see, because that might not be the same, because when we look at, there's a different, okay, it's Hadar. Okay, so this verse, his glory is like the firstling of his bullock and his horns. Okay, look, it says like the firstling of his bullock. Now we're gonna go to what we were reading about Nimrod being the mighty hunter before Ha-Elohim. So this is one of the clues that we see here of that first Mamleket, that kingdom, like that opening, the Fetah, the opening, the Fetah Negesh, the Fatah, you know, Fatah is like that opening door, right, in ancient Egypt. And the Fetah Negesh is the law of the kings, And we already read that righteous kingdoms under the institution of Ha-Elohim had that book. They would use those doctrines of that book in order to keep their kingdom in order. You know what I mean? So another term, like I said, when we're speaking about the cleanliness, that's a law. You know what I mean? The woman in her cycle, she probably, you know, on if you really pay attention to what you naturally see, she really don't even want to be around nobody. You know what I mean? She don't want to be around nobody. Sometimes actually it's a time for them, they need their own space at that time, like 7 days. And I'm sure most women, if they can get more space than what they probably be having at that time, they would love to have it. You know what I'm saying? Leave her alone for like 7 days. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of times you'll notice that men, they're not in a very good mood either at that time. You know what I mean? They going through their cleansing period, they purifying. And you can make them dirty with your dirty ass spirit and your dirty ass mind, thinking that you're supposed to be getting up on them and laying all next to them like that. You know what I'm saying? No, you're not. You know, so Again, this verse, his glory is like the firstling of his bullock, and his horns are like the horns of a unicorn. You know, with them he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth, right? And they are the 10,000s of Afar, Ephraim, that ruddy red Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh, you know, Manasseh, like the soldiers. So now, if you compare this verse, like I said, with the palette of Narmer, and then go here to okay, this verse in and the sons of Cush. Now here we go. Let's do it. And the sons of Cush, right, which is Ethiopia. So you can see the sons of Cush, or Ethiopia, the name of the son of Ham, if you didn't know that, the territory, right? Also of what? An Israelite, right? Also of an Israelite, right? So the sons of Cush, and being that we will proclaim to you that Nimrod was a Hebrew. Yeah, he was a Hebrew, because Hebrew is not like polite. I think polite was looking for a word for Hebrew. Though, if you're not reading the Goods, you're not, you know, the ancient Goods, the ancient Ethiopia, because the Hebrew alphabet has already been found in the ancient Ethiopic Goods. It's already been preserved there, the Abu Gida and all that. So you got a lot more reading to do than just the basics of the Hebrew or the Arabic, because they are both Afro-Semitic languages, right? And they are basically particles of the Afro-Semitic languages of the Goods, the ancient Goods, you know what I mean? And that's where we'll find the Hebraic spirit coming from the Almighty Ha-Elohim, or the Most High God who runs the skies, and his son, Jesus Christus, Jesus Christ, Yahweh, Jah, Rastafari, you know. So, and the sons of Cush, Seba, Hawilah, and Sapta, and Ra'ama, and Sabteka, and the sons of Ra'ama, Sheba, and Dedan, right? So now, verse 8, and Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a what? A mighty one, Gibor, a powerful warrior in the earth, Eretz. He was a mighty Gibor hunter, Tzayid, before Fanim, and I just lift now when you read it all out. The Yahweh, wherefore can it is said Amar, even as Nimrod, the mighty Gibor, the mighty hunter Tzayid, and then before Fanim, Lifna, the Yahweh. So he was a mighty hunter before the Lord, wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Yahweh, the mighty hunter before the Yahweh. And the beginning, and this is where we start off with kingdoms. Remember we were talking about Deuteronomy 33 and 17, right? And the beginning of his kingdom was what? The beginning of his mamlaka, his dominion, the estate, the country, way before Egypt was even mentioned. Egypt is not even mentioned yet. As a matter of fact, the son of Ham that this latter uses the tradition known as Egypt, or later uses the template that is known as Egypt, which is a founded, institutionalized glory, right, of Ha-Elohim, if it has any benefit. You know what I mean? Now, when it went away from the one true God and the commands and the instituted laws of the Almighty, of course, they begin to fall off. But those people were Mitzrayimites, if you will. They were Mitzrayim's children. They were the children of Mitzrayim, and then later this name change from Mitzrayim. You don't see Mitzrayim, but you see Egypt. And Egypt, in its bad symbology in the biblical scriptures, in the bad spirit of Egypt, it becomes bondage. It becomes Sodom. It becomes Gomorrah. It becomes the place where the Chaldeans basically, they destroy, they waste. It becomes a waste. You know what I'm saying? And other peoples ended up taking it over. You know what I'm saying? Why? Because of slipping, missing the mark, hatiyat, bestiality, and immoral values like uncleanliness, like we were speaking about the wife being on her menstrual and you trying to get up on her and stuff like that, when you're not supposed to. Being with a woman in her flower is defiling, and you and your people become cut off. Maybe that's part of the cutoff. Though the ancient Egyptians, they heard you say that, they probably, who knows what they do to you, you know what I mean? Because when they were righteous, they didn't like those things either. There were laws of cleanliness that they had, you know what I mean, that they were against, that matched the Hebraic law or that matched the Feta Neges. And when they fell off, especially during the time of Ramesses is really bigging up himself, really. Ramesses was really bigging up himself. If you think about it, Ramesses was like, yo, he was on himself. He was like, he was in love with himself and stuff. You know what I mean? He was making people praise him and stuff like that. He was having buildings and stuff built that were not really even permitted by the ancients. The ancients didn't permit him to do that. The ancient Egypt, there's nowhere it says ancient Egyptians said they prophesied that Ramesses would come along and da-da-da-da. No, I don't think they was proud of Ramesses at all. And during the Ramesses period, they speak of the Hyksos. You know what I'm saying? So when you're speaking about Ramesses, probably people that we even like you. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? The whole thing, what they was on, it was totally different. So, in the beginning of his kingdom, his Mamlaka, because this is what we're speaking about, the beginning of the state, the country, you know what I'm saying? The royal, the reign. Let's see, what else does it say here? Malak, to reign, to ascend the throne, to induct into royalty, to take counsel, these counselors. And the beginning of his Mamlaka was Bab El, and it wasn't the one that confusion. Now look how they mixed that up with Babel, like the Tower of Babel. And look, the Tower of Babel hasn't even come up yet. It's a chapter away. It's like in chapter 11. Right now, we in chapter 10. You know what I'm saying? So now they call him Bab El, which is the gates of Ha Elohim, the gates of Ha Elohim, as it says in Psalm 24, be lifted up, O you gates, right? Be lifted up, O you gates, your souls harboring the gate of Ha Elohim, that the gate that keeps the enemy out, the guards at the soldiers at the gate, the Herubim with the fiery sword. That's in your spirit. You know, when we proclaim Ha Elohim, the Almighty, Jah, Rastafari, in the name of his son, Jesus Christos, Jesus Christ, Yehoshua HaMashiach, this evidence is clearly here in the Bible. And it destroys all of that faulty BS about respect the gods of Egypt. When you say respect the ancients of Egypt, like the fathers of Egypt, many of them would have did things that would have killed you or murdered, you know, really murdered you. You know what I mean? Because they were worshiping false deities for their own riches. We can see this. This has already happened. If they was doing something so right, we would have been over there. We would have been all right over there. Both, they messed up, just like when you say Israel messed up. Yes, they did. We all did. That's why we were scattered throughout all the lands. You know, Yahweh said, I will remove this people, scatter them throughout all the lands. They'll go out with their, you know, naked with their buttocks showing, to the shame of what? Egypt. To the shame of Egypt. You will be ashamed. You know, like what it says in Isaiah 20:5. They were ashamed of Ethiopia. Right? They were ashamed of Ethiopia. Their inheritance, and Egypt, the glorious parts of Egypt. Notice how these other brothers, when they speaking about Egypt, they're not ashamed to speak on or talk bad about Ha Elohim, but they'll big up these guys they say is Ra and all these other things. Even though in the Hebrew the word Ra means evil. Ra means evil. Nobody said it was a person. We know it was a spirituality. You know what I mean? We're not saying that it was a person. Rai is the vision of Ha Elohim. Is the vision, or you say Ray, like the symbology with the sun rays. I could see some of that. But accurately, you probably off. You know what I mean? We wouldn't get accurate what the name of the sun rays are and everything. And we do it when we do it and we break it down in the language. Though what we could come together on is the righteous commands and orders that we can come together on, that we can see the similarities in, and this will help us unite and move forward. Because again, if we was to diss God for God and all of that, Ha Elohim, that's a personal experience of black man, black and brown man with his God. You know, because he said that Egypt is my people in Isaiah 19 and 25. And give a shout out to Wyndham Ayason, you know, for reminding the ayah that he did say that Egypt was, you know, Egypt is my people, like, you know, but apparently a people that don't remember who they are. You know what I'm saying? And the people who were Egypt was scattered throughout, just like the children of Israel. Black Egypt was destroyed. We already know that. Why? Because it's not ruling right now. You know what I'm saying? Now, Israel is ruling and been ruling at all times. And they stopped ruling after the time of, what, 1974, when the last king to sit on the throne of David was taken off. This is obvious natural world evidence. We don't need to argue down what has already been seen and done. They're showing you the coronation of the King of Kings, November 2nd, 1930. Now argue against that. A kingdom that really existed, a king of kings after the bloodline of David, who went around sovereignly freeing his people, redeeming his people all over the world, speaking to every nation. All the nations bowed down to the King of Kings. Ethiopia, the 73rd nation to enter into the League of Nations. Right? And even this is a testimony in the ancient. That's why he says the glory of Egypt. The Mamlakat, the institution, the Feta Nagesh of Egypt was his command and righteous laws instituted even in Egypt. Even they use a different name like Eo or Yehu. You know what I mean? Because we was looking at that when we were looking at they were speaking about Nimrod. Now it says in the beginning of the king of his kingdom was Bab-el, the gates of Ha Elohim, and Erek, which is length, Akkad, like Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Ahad, and Kalne, right? And the land of Shinar, Ethiopia. So even with that statement, I think they said that the Chinese president made about, tell him to refute this, because this was all black, bruh, and it was righteous. And they were Hebrews ruling at the time. They were Ethiopian Hebrews. You know what I mean? China connection with Ethiopia, the Hebrews. Go there, bro. Go there. You know what I'm saying? Because it's a new future, and these youths rising up, they're going to be soldiers in the name of Christ. They're going to know all these things. And they're going to hold y'all accountable for what y'all doing to the Almighty and his word. And that's the truth. So, and then second, 11. Out of that land now, here we go with the Shem and Ham knowledge. The Ham, Shem. Remember that the Hebrews are Hamites and Shemites, bro. Know what I mean? Where y'all get that at? Out of the land went forth Asher, who's who? The second son of Shem. Now remember, this kingdom was the beginning of Nimrod, who was the son of Cush. He was the son of Ham, bro. He was the son of Ham, and he was said to be a mighty hunter before the Yahweh. You saw this right here. Yahweh didn't diss all the sons of Ham. The ones that started messing up were the Canaanites. You know what I'm saying? And we get into that afterwards. And then the sons of Shem, who became enemies of the people as well, which were not Asher, but then those who became the Assyrians. Okay? So we know that those who descended from people who began to start righteous had began to hatiyat, fall off, sin, Mr. Mar, start effing up, worshiping, idolizing different evil gods and everything like that. And then they were enslaved into building the Tower of Babel, for short. You know what I mean? You can go look at the chapters from here. This is chapter 10. This is before we even get to the Tower of Babel. They were still good right here. So out of that land went forth Asher. Look, he builded Nineveh and the city of Rehoboth and Kala, right? And Rezin, between Nineveh and Kala, right? Rezin between Nineveh and Kala. He builded these cities. He out of that land, out of Shinar, out of Ethiopia, ancient Ethiopia, you know, Nimrod, who was the mighty hunter before the Ha Elohim, those people of Shinar, Ethiopia. You know what I'm saying? We're not talking about everybody else. So when people go and say things like, the black people think that they came from, but we not worried about what you think, because we know y'all already lied and changed history so it would fit like an albinism or a racial change that wasn't even there in the past, in the history before. Before the flood, there were probably no other race but one race. Yeah, there's not no but they know that. That's why in the movie when they lied, they had to make everybody white. You know, like when you look at that Noah movie, the more modern type they got. Everybody had to be white because they understood that everybody had to be one race at that time. And if they already lying that people were white or other races, you know what I'm saying? That they would have to make them that in the movie too. You know what I'm saying? So to continue on the lie, they had to do that. So out of that land went forth Asher and builded Nineveh and the city of Rehoboth and Kala and Rezin between Nineveh and Kala. The same is a great city. Now here we go with Mitzrayim. Now we go to Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is mentioned, let's see, all the way when we go down to, let's see what it says in we're in Deuteronomy. And you murmured in your tents and said, okay, but now the thing is that we're looking at the word Mitzrayim. So what we want to do, because when you put in Mitzrayim, it is still known as Egypt. You know what I'm saying? It's still known as Egypt. Now they say upper and lower Egypt because of this. Actually, upper Egypt, upper Ethiopia was Cush. And we know that from the Bible because it says that the beginning of his kingdom, which was Nimrod, which was the son of Cush, who was a mighty hunter before the High Elohim. He began to be a Gabor, a mighty Gabor, a powerful Gabor in the earth, a tyrant against the enemy. And if he was before High Elohim, meaning that we know that he was righteous. He was righteous at that time. So whatever Nimrod came along and began them to design, you know, like the Tower of Babel, Ha-Satan, if you read the ancient books, like the ancient Ethiopic book of Jubilee, the ancient Ethiopic book of Adam and Eve versus Satan, or the ancient Ethiopic book of Enoch, and if you read these books and you pay attention, Satan will always have people who mimicked the children of God. Even look at many of Cain's sons at a time were named Mahalalel, and he had other sons that were named the same name, Canaan and stuff like that, the same names as the children of God. Why? Because they were mimicking. They were doing this. Why? To fool the people. They were saying like, yo, we the ones. We the children. But really they weren't. They were the children of the devil. Because of their spirit, their mind, they had the children of the devil mind within them. So, and Rezin between Nineveh and Kala, the same is a great city. Now, after that is mentioned Mitzrayim. Now, we go and we put in, let's see, let's find Mitzrayim. All right. It only goes up, let's see, this is 1, 2, 3, 4 verses that mention the original name of Egypt, which is Mitzrayim, and then 2 more verses in Chronicles. Other than that, Egypt is mentioned as Mitzrayim is mentioned as Egypt the rest of the time. This is the only time it's mentioned as Mitzrayim and the sons of Ham, Cush. The original name of Egypt at the time was Mitzrayim. We can't say Egypt existed before the flood because we don't find any evidence of that. You know what I mean? Anything being called Egypt before the flood, so don't even do it. We can't do that. And then chapter 10, verse 13, and Mitzrayim begat Ludim and Anamim and Lehabim and Naphtuhim. Okay, and then over here, and when the inhabitants of the land of the Canaanites, oh wow, good, saw the mourning in the floor of Atad, they said, this is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians. Now, I remember they were saying that was the land of Canaan. Remember they would say that Egypt was the land of Canaan, and right here we see where even the Canaanites knew that they were not the Egyptians. They knew they were not the Mitzrayimites. They were other sons of Cush, but they were not Mitzrayim. But what happened was when people didn't want to go to their own lands, they started to plagiarize themselves within other people's lands and histories. This is what happened. The Canaanites didn't want to do it, and if you see the original Egyptians and the sons of Cush, could this have something to do with Nimrod, who was a mighty hunter? You know what I'm saying? And the righteous of Mitzrayim, or the righteous of Egypt, that was telling the Canaanites, don't try to inhabit Libya, the land that is not yours. And this is way back at the time. Way back at time. You can go look up where Reggie does the video over the Libyan palettes, because he did find some evidence of the Libyan, and we thought that was interesting too. You know, much of that is interesting, the evidence that is comparable with the biblical scriptures, or for Jah, like Haile Selassie says, QEDAMAWI Haile Selassie says, for my part, I glory in the Bible. So here is mentioned Mitzrayim, right? And he begat Ludim and Anamim and Lehabim and Naphtuhim and Parusim and Kashluhim, and out of whom came Philistine and Kaphtorim. And then we get to Canaan, who begat Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusi, the Jebusite. You know who those people are, right? He said if you didn't destroy them in the book of Joshua, there would be a thorn in your side. Right, like the Israelites. I know those who say they are the Jews but are not Jews, but are the synagogue of Satan. Behold, I will make them come kiss your feet and show them how I've always loved you, which is not a literally kissing your feet, right? But it is arming your military established organized soldiers. But how can you be military organized established soldiers if you're not properly under the almighty Ha-Elohim, but you claiming gangs and all this other stuff that don't get no love in, as far as being institutionalized? You know what I mean? Like, they don't get no love as a nation. It's not a nation. It's smaller than a nation. We understand the nation, the 5%ers, and the the brothers of the gods and earth. You know what I'm saying? We understand that principle. Though Haile Selassie, what we're thankful about Rastafari is that he was the sovereign king of kings who showed his sovereignty, who showed his glory at the maximum level, and showed the people his sovereignty to the Gentiles. The Gentiles knew he was sovereign. The Gentiles respected Haile Selassie. Matter of fact, there's a saying that we actually say to ourselves. We believe that maybe that the Gentile fight has so much respect for Haile Selassie, who he was, that they have to fool like a red brown, like kind of down the line man, like a reddish man down the line, who they know was more akin to the black and brown peoples, like Mussolini at the time, and get him to attack Ethiopia, because we already knew that they knew that His Imperial Majesty was the King of Kings. He was the one. And when Mussolini and them attacked Ethiopia, you know, they had the skull and bones on their plane. And go look it up. Go look at the videos. Go look at World War II in color, where it briefly mentions the King of Kings, because they have to. And they like to not mention Mussolini or the King of Kings in history, because if they mention Mussolini too much, then it'll bring up QEDAMAWI, Haile Selassie, the King of Kings, and then you'll start to see the Redeemer, and then you might start going to study, and then you might redeem yourself in Christ. Because remember that Christ came to redeem the sons of Israel, who were supposed to be a light to the Gentiles, in order to redeem the Gentiles out of the evil that the greedy people of their own people had done to them, just like our greedy ass people had done to us. And then they came together, you know what I mean, in this same type of black and white greed. And therefore you have the Amorite, or the American, the believer in down pressing the impoverished people, let them die out. But remember that in their death is going to be like the brother who persecuted Lazarus, who had to tell Abraham when he was in hell, it was so hot, if he could but, Lazarus could just but dip his finger in some water and he could get a drop of that water on his tongue, that he wished that he could go back and tell his people what was happening to him in the Gehenna, in the Sheol, in the Hades. You know what I'm saying? In that place of, you know what I mean, that judgment that you go to, like we said, Jabari was showing the spiritual judgment place. You know what I mean? For those who didn't accept Ha-Elohim, and their heart was weighed against a feather. You know what I mean? So those who didn't know no better, that's why Jesus Christ says, forgive them, for they know not what they do. But those of you who have been told, who know more, what do you think that's going to say about you? You know, what do you think that's going to say about you? See, so this is something that we all need to think about. Shalom.